Today I'll explain you about Java HTTP Servlet. Now HTTP Servlet is one of the abstract class available under javax.servlet.http package. So whenever you develop any of the application through HTTP Servlet, then you need to import the additional package called javax.servlet.http apart from javax.servlet. Now the HTTP Servlet class extends the generic Servlet class. So if you can see the hierarchy of Servlet, we have a Servlet interface at the top, then generic Servlet, then HTTP Servlet. So HTTP Servlet has been derived from generic Servlet, and generic Servlet is implementing the Servlet interface. So we can say that HTTP Servlet class is also implementing Servlet interface. Now the HTTP Servlet class is used for HTTP request and response only, whereas the generic Servlet can be used for all types of protocols, but HTTP Servlet class is used only for HTTP based request and response only. Now, to create a servlet, the class must extend HTTP Servlet class. So if you write any of the application through HTTP Servlet class, then obviously we need to extend HTTP Servlet class, and you need to override at least one of the methods which are available in HTTP Servlet class. For example, we have do get method, do post, do delete, do put, then do trace, and other methods are available. So at least one you need to override. Now coming to the methods of HTTP Servlet class, we have a service method. Now this method is also been available in generic Servlet class. Now this particular service method dispatches the request to the protected service method by converting the request and response object into HTTP type. So here we have a public service method and we have a protected service method. Now this is the public service method. So whenever the service method is being invoked, it is going to dispatch the request to the other service method which is protected type. So the access specifier for this current service method is public, and the next we have one more service method which has been protected type. Okay, so the request has been given to the protected service method by converting the request and response object into HTTP type. That means from the generic type it need to convert into the HTTP type. So if you can see the syntax here, you can see the access specifier as public, then void service. Here you can see it is holding servlet request and servlet response, and it is also throwing servlet exception and IO exception. So as we have already seen this one in generic Servlet, the same thing has been available here, so that whenever the request is being handed over to the service method, the service method is going to hand over that to the protected service method. So coming to second one, this is one more service method which is protected one. So it receives the request from public service method and dispatch the request to one of the do X methods. So X could be do get, like do post, do put, do head, do trace. So one of the methods, it depends on the situation it is going to handle, depending on the incoming HTTP request type. So if you can see the syntax here, now it is protected. So the first service method is going to hand over the request to this particular service method which is of protected type. And here if you can see the parameters, you can see HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response. Now this HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response both are interfaces, and this REQ is the reference variable for HTTP servlet request and RES for HTTP servlet response. So the earlier service method is going to hand over to this service method whenever it receives any request, and the servlet request type is converted into HTTP servlet request type. The response, whatever it has been generating, the servlet response will become the HTTP servlet response now, and it is also throwing servlet exception as well as IO exception. So if the particular file, whatever you are trying to search, or the method is not been invoked properly, then servlet exception is raised. And if the print writer object or the output stream object is not been initialized properly, then the IO exception is getting raised. Now, in continuation of the methods of HTTP, we have do get method. Now this method is used to handle the get request on the server side. Now this method also automatically supports HTTP head Now the head request is a get request which returns no body. There should be some space here in response request. So body is the actual content. Now here it need to it is basically used for the requesting some data which is been less than 255 characters of request. And this particular get method, when you're calling, it is also supporting some header information into that. Now the query string is visible in address bar of the browser. So what is query string here is, so if you can see the address bar and you can just observe that there are some question marks in between. Suppose if you take Gmail, once you enter the login ID and password or any other mail, once you enter the user ID and password submit button, some applications you can see where you get a question mark and followed by parameter and assignment operator value. So the question mark to the end of the string is called as query string. So whenever you are seeing the URL like question mark to the end of the string, I can easily say that okay, they are using doGet method. If that question mark to the end of the string, the parameters are not appended, you're not able to see that, then you can say that doPost method has been applicable. Okay, so this particular doGet method is trying to send some request and able to get some response. So it is also throwing servlet exception, IO exception, and the parameters for this one is HttpServlet request and response. Now coming to the next one, doPost method. This method is used to handle the post request on the server side. So this method allows the client to send data of unlimited length. Now doGet method, we have seen that there is a restriction of less than 255 characters only, but here it is unlimited length of request you can send to the web server at any time. The query string is also been not visible in the address bar of the browser, so we can say that comparatively doGet and doPost, doGet is being used for less than 255 characters of request, but here in doPost unlimited length of the request you can send. Then query string is visible in doGet, whereas in doPost query string is not visible. So we can say that doPost is much more secure than doGet. Now coming to syntax, you can see protected void doPost, and the parameters are same, and it throws servlet exception and IO exception. Then coming to the doHead method, this method is overridden to handle the head request. So only the header information can be extracted, like what is the content length, what is the type of encoding, when the request has come, how many number of bytes it has been asking for, like that. In this method, the response contains the only header but does not contain the message body. Now coming to syntax of this, protected void doHead is a method name, and the parameters are same for all the methods, and it's throwing servlet exception, IO exception. Now doPut method. Now this method is overridden to handle the put request. This method allows the client to store the information on the server. For example, to save the image file on the server. Okay, so if you want to store some information, you can go for doPut. This method is called by the server through the service method to handle a put request. So it depends on the situation. Like already in the first method I said public service method is there. It depends on the request. It is going to call any of these particular methods. Okay, so if you can see the syntax, protected void, doPut method, and the HttpServlet request and HttpServlet response, throw servlet exception, IO exception. DoDelete. This method is overridden to handle delete request. This method allows a client to remove a document or a web page from the server. If you want to delete any of the files from the server, you can issue a command, issue a method, or call the method called doDelete. While using this method, it may be useful to save a copy of the affected URL in temporary storage to avoid data loss. So before deleting a copy, you can save, or the URL can be saved, then you delete. For future reference, you can have some data. Then if you can see the syntax of this, protected void doDelete, and the rest of the thing is same. Now doTrace, this method is overridden to handle the trace request. So whenever you get any sort of exception, you want to debug that, then you can go for this one. This method returns the headers sent with the trace request to the client so that they can be used for debugging at the client end. Then coming to the method signature, protected void doTrace, HTTP servlet request, HTTP servlet response, and it throws the same sort of exceptions. Now here we have a method called get last modified. This method returns a time the HTTP servlet request object was last modified. So here we are talking about the request object modification when it has got last modified. Then if time is unknown, the method will return a negative number. So if you can see the syntax, protected long, get last modified. So here it is long because we have a very huge value. So that's why the return type is long. And here we are only working with the HTTP servlet request. Okay. So these are few methods for HTTP servlet class. So in my further video, I'll show the demonstration of how to use this HTTP servlet class in order to create an HTTP servlet application. So if you like this video, do comment, subscribe, and share it to your friends. Thank you.